Released in June of 1997, the 167-card Weatherlight concluded the Mirage block and began the Weatherlight Saga story arc, considered by many Magic players to be the best long-term story arc ever in the game's history. Now, when I say Weatherlight concluded the Mirage block, I use the word conclude rather loosely, as it had very little to tie itself in with the block's previous two sets, Mirage and Visions, aside from being set in Jamura. Gone was the story of Jamura's three nations, along with some help from Teferi, battling and ultimately defeating the evil Karavek. Instead, we get what plays as, more or less, the foreword to the Weatherlight story, the game's first megaplot, based around the iconic skyship, the Weatherlight, and its captain, Sisay.
I am not a Sisay!
Really, Weatherlight marked a turning point in both design and marketing philosophy for Magic the Gathering, as both a card game and a brand. Whereas prior sets had allusions to a bigger overall story, some with comic book tie-ins, Weatherlight was the first to actually tell an ordered narrative and focused on developed, tropish characters. This is also where Magic novels, previously written as their own independent stories based loosely on the card game, actually began to tell narratives of the sets themselves, beginning with the novel Wrath and Storm. While the third set of the Mirage block, there isn't much about Weatherlight that is all that Mirage-y. In fact, the two big abilities from the first two sets, phasing and flanking, hardly make an appearance in the set, with the former appearing on 3 and the latter appearing on only 2 cards. Also, Weatherlight is the first set that takes the cantrips that debuted in Ice Age and carried over into Mirage and Visions, and replaced them with the quicker cantrip style that players are accustomed to still today. It was also the last set ever printed to contain a card containing the banding keyword before the ability was abandoned altogether. What the set did have, for one reason or another, is a rather noticeable graveyard focus.
Yes. Poor Yorick.
I knew him, Horatio.
To that end, there are a number of cards that make players discard cards, sacrifice creatures, and even exile cards from their graveyards. There was also a 5-colored land that was designed to wind up in the player's graveyard when the player was done with it. The set even debuted one of the overall best cards ever for putting creatures in your graveyard so that you can abuse them later, in the appropriately named Buried Alive.
It seems I've been buried alive.
That said, most of Weatherlight's best and most powerful cards have absolutely nothing to do with the graveyard theme that Wizards was pushing. And that's probably why very few people see this set as being Graveyard Matters. Simply put, cards like Null Rod, Doomsday, Ophidian, and Imperial Armor, each completely disconnected from the set's actual theme, turned out to be the most notable of the set. Weatherlight marks not the end of an era in Magic the Gathering, but rather the turning of one. Just as sets rotate out of Standard, back then known as Type 2, Magic is rotating from its early days and ways into one of cohesive storytelling, fleshed out characters, and a focus on creating sets that not only took place within the story, but also had a hand in telling it. It was the final set with Sue Ann Harkley as art director, and the last before a screenwriter turned game developer would take his first of many leads on a set. But we'll save the wrath of Rosewater for another video.
What, are you crazy? Why are you laughing?
Is Weatherlight among your favorite Magic the Gathering sets? If so, tell us about it in the comments below. And be sure to follow Magic Untapped on YouTube and support us on Patreon for more great Magic the Gathering content.